and wrapping up our series on a dialogue on race between two friends, Bill Treasure and Ali Moore. This is the fourth and final video in this short series in which Bill is asking questions that he's heard over the years and that I've heard as well. But they're questions that could be considered racist that Bill is asking to get my open, honest, authentic response, feedback, and it's just an open dialogue. So this is video number 4. Thank you.
So 2 more questions.
Yep.
This next one, I'm a little afraid to ask you, but I'm gonna open it up and be vulnerable. You know, I've known you a long time. You told me this once, but I forget what it was. What is something that I've said to you that was racist that I may not have viewed it as racism at the time? I'm worried what you're going to say.
No, you know, so before I answer that about you in particular, I will say that on an everyday basis, whether it be just walking down the street, whether it be in your workplace, whether it be at church, there are signs of microaggression that people display that they don't even realize it all the time, right? When I was a young boy in church, and my mother raised us in the Catholic Church, and so I went to a church that was predominantly white as a youth. I later left that church and actually found like a 60-40 African American to non-Black Catholic church that I then attended for a few years as well. But when I was in the predominantly white church, I was an altar boy, and when I was in mass, but wasn't on the altar serving as an altar boy, but sitting in the congregation, there would be people that still clutched their purse when they saw me. Now, they knew I was an altar boy in this church, but they would still clutch their purse when they saw me. That's not even microaggression, right? That's literally overtly stating, I fear that you are going to steal my purse, right? And we see signs of that every day. Like, Black people in this country are faced with things like that, comments that are made, and comments, some of them, the person making the comment doesn't even realize that what they're saying is racist. It's so institutionalized, and they were raised in a way in which they don't realize that their comments are racist. And so your question was, what's something that you may have said? I remember one time, and I forgot where we were. We were on a road trip doing some consulting somewhere, and you asked me about my thoughts on white people trying to sound Black. And my response to you was, well, what is sounding according to any ethnicity or race? Now, with that being said, we know that stereotypically there's certain dialects and there are certain words, phrases that all of us, even Black people, will equate with sounding a certain way, sounding white, sounding Black, but as I stated when we started this whole conversation, what does a person in South Texas sound like compared to a person in New York? What does a person in Northern California sound like compared to a person in Southern Florida, or someone in Wisconsin compared to someone in, pick your place. And so this whole notion of sounding Black, sounding white, or someone trying to sound Black, I would say that our society at large, across the board, regardless of your color, has this notion of what you are supposed to sound like. And I am even guilty of it. You're guilty of it. We're all guilty of assuming that when we hear a voice, we can equate that voice with someone's ethnicity. And even if that is true, so let's take that even a step further. Let's say it's true. Let's say I can tell by that person's vernacular, their choice of words, and their sentence structure that they're Black. What difference does it make? What difference does it make in my understanding of their intelligence, of their ability to perform a task, of their behavior, of their worth to our society? Should it make a difference at all? And when we say, this person is trying to sound a certain way, are we then institutionally and subconsciously saying that they're trying to be something different because it is more valuable to be something different? I have been accused many times throughout my life of sounding a certain way. And I would always say back to those people, regardless of what I sound like and regardless of what words I choose to use, does it make a difference at all? I sound a certain way because of the way my upbringing, where I've lived, the job I hold. You know, I live in Atlanta, Georgia. I've lived in Atlanta for 25 years now, but you know that my work takes me across the world and across the nation. I've spent more time outside of Atlanta than in Atlanta. So if I don't have an Atlanta accent, it's because I spent the last 3.5 years in Las Vegas, you know, traveling back to Atlanta, you know, on the off weeks, or I spent time in California, or I spent a year in New York, or I spent time overseas. And so this concept of what do I think about people trying to sound a certain way, I would ask you or anyone else, will define what that other way is or what that sound is. And then let me ask you, do all Black people sound that way? Do all white people sound that way? And if they do, what's wrong with it? What's wrong with someone saying, in order for me to survive in my environment, or in order for me to survive at my job, or in order for me to survive in my geographic location, I have to sound like the people here? I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying that when you go to a different country, you try to speak not only in that language, but in the dialect of the people who are speaking that language. And so this notion of code switching, which is the sort of sociological term for it, is you try to speak in the vernacular, in the language, with the dialect that makes you acceptable to the people that you're around, that makes you more productive in your workplace, that makes you, for white people anyway, that makes someone seem less threatening to them, which, you know, opens up a whole nother can of worms of, you know, what determines what threatens you and why are you threatened by it. And so that's something that you asked me once that, you know, I had a lot to think about and a lot to say, but my basic notion was, okay, you asked, what do I think about white people who try to sound Black? I was like, well, what is sounding Black? Define that for me. And what do I think about it? Nothing, because what's wrong with it if they want to do that?
All right, good answer.
And I would say this too. There are dialects here in our country where people know they're pronouncing words wrong. There are words that New Yorkers say, or people from Boston, or people from that put an R on the end of words and things like that, that we know that's not the way that word is pronounced because it's not even spelled that way, right. But we accept it based on geography, not based on race. We say, well, that's the way they sound from there.
Yeah. In the morning, I go and I get my underpants from my dresser drawer.
Yeah.
All right. So then the last question, what do Blacks want from whites? Is how can we be better brothers and sisters in humanity, but what do Blacks want from whites?
So that may seem like the easiest question you've asked, but it's probably the most nuanced question. What do we all want? We all want to be treated, I'm speaking for the world now, right? We all want to be treated fair, with equity and with respect, regardless of who it comes from. We all want to be treated based on the content of our character, not the color of our skin. We all want to be treated without prejudice, without being prejudged, based on something that you may have never even been exposed to, right? You look at me jogging through your neighborhood and you assume that I'm up to no good. Whereas I'm jogging because I've been a runner my entire life. I've run marathons. I've run half marathons. I was on the track team. So I'm jogging to stay healthy. You look at my tattoos and you say, he's got a tattoo down his leg and a tattoo on his arm and a tattoo across his wrist and tattoos on his back, and you prejudge, where I would say, yeah, the tattoo on my leg is the name of my son and the name of my daughter. The tattoo on my wrist is the name of my wife. The tattoo on my back is the symbol for courage and another symbol for tenacity. The tattoo on my shoulder is a cross. There's no gang affiliation. And if there was, you don't know anything about me. You don't know. And so I would say, I personally want people to look at everyone with the same lens, to say, hey, this is a person who's worthy of my respect, and at a minimum, worthy to not be prejudged. I also want people to look at each other and recognize that all of our historical struggle to get to where we are right now is not the same. When people say, I look at you and I don't see color, I would say, see my color. Don't equate my color with something negative. Don't look at me and say, hey, based on the color of his skin, there must be something wrong with him. That's what I would say generally. For me personally, I don't give a shit what people, I'm going to stand on my own merits and on my own laurels. If you don't like me, you don't like my answers, that's something you're going to have to deal with, because I have a bigger mission in life to press forward, to be successful, to help my family, to help my friends, to help my ethnicity, my race, to help my community. And so what, the illogical and nonsensical prejudice that someone will have for me isn't going to stop me. It isn't going to, make me cower down to them and beg for their acceptance. I don't care whether you accept me or not. But as a whole, as a general, when you ask the question, what do Black people want from white people? I think Black people want what everyone wants, and that is to be respected and not be held back by prejudice.
Good answer. Good answer. So, those are the questions. And for the folks that are listening in, I get the sense of, most people will hear this stuff as very reasonable.
Yeah.
There will be a certain population that will want to fight in their comments. And then there'll be the fringe that'll have racist things to say and such. Let it out. Go ahead, purge that stuff out. Because I tell you what, I pity you and I'll pray for you. That's what you're going to get out of me.
Yeah.
But for the rest of you, I hope you open up your ears, open up your mind, and listen with an open heart, and maybe let's all learn together. I remember when I was growing up, also, I grew up in the Catholic Church, and we'd have folk mass, right? And I listened to those nuns, and I believed in those songs, and I believe that, you're to treat others as you treat yourself, and that's it. The golden rule matters. It doesn't matter what color, ethnicity, where you grew up, whatever. The golden rule matters, and if you purport yourself to be a Christian or whatever faith you are, then you got to put that stuff into practice. And I appreciate, all your answers.
Yeah.
But, I trust you and I love you, and so I appreciate the opportunity to do this. Hope it makes some difference.
Yeah. And I would add a couple of caveats. So one, I know you, I know what's in your heart. I know that even asking some of these questions was difficult for you, because you have your own understanding, your own experiences, your own take on this, but these are the types of questions that you are curious about, and that other people may be curious to hear the answer. Now, with these answers, because I didn't know, what you were going to ask, I probably got a little, long in the tooth, long-winded on some of my answers. But these are, this is what is inside many people of color, the, wanting the opportunity to talk through these things. And as you said, some people are going to look at this and agree. Some people are going to look at this and disagree. I'm not an economist. I'm not a historian. I am a consultant in the leadership development space, right? And so my answers are based on my lived experience inside corporate America, outside of corporate America, walking down the street on an everyday basis. And so for the people who are going to look at some of my answers and say, well, he missed an opportunity to speak about this, or he was a little off on his understanding of this, I would encourage you, with respect, to add to the conversation, to say, here's where I agree with you, here's where I disagree with you. But I hope and I pray what we did demonstrate more of today is that you can have positive, open dialogue in which you are trying to understand and then to be understood, right? From Stephen Covey, where you have the opportunity to open up in an environment where you're not being judged on your answer, but say, this is my take on it. And if I'm wrong, if I'm a little bit off, then help me understand your perspective. But I didn't come here to convince you of anything. I didn't come here to tell you this is the way it is. I'm telling you what I've lived, what I've experienced, what I've seen, and what many other people have experienced and what they've seen. And so if we can open up this dialogue to more people, and again, as you pointed out, there are going to be some people who, you know, some racist people who are just going to come in and try to bash the whole thing. God bless you too. I pray for you. I won't sit idly by. Bill knows me. You know, I pray for a lot of people, but you're not going to take advantage of me either. And so with that saying, I welcome all those comments, and Bill, thank you for being a part of this conversation with me today.
Thanks, buddy.
All right. Thanks. Take care.